The rain was coming down hard that Tuesday evening. Daniel Harrison sat in his office on the 42nd floor, staring at the city lights below without really seeing them. Another late night. Another stack of papers that needed his signature. Another round of meetings that had stretched far beyond their scheduled time. He rubbed his tired eyes and checked his watch. 8:30. The building would be nearly empty by now. Just the cleaning crew and maybe a few other workaholics like himself, still chained to their desks. Daniel stood up and started gathering his things. At 46 years old, he had everything most people dreamed of. He was the CEO of a software company that had grown from a small startup to a corporation with offices in 12 countries. He had money, respect, and a corner office with a view that some people would literally kill for. But lately, none of it seemed to matter much. He threw files into his briefcase with less care than usual. His mind was already on the drive home, the empty house waiting for him, and the dinner he would probably skip because he was too tired to bother heating anything up. The briefcase was old. It had been a gift from his wife Victoria, back when they were just starting out, back when they had dreams bigger than their bank account, and love that made everything feel possible. The leather was worn now, the brass clasps a little loose. He probably should have replaced it years ago, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. Daniel grabbed his coat and headed for the elevator. The hallway was quiet except for the hum of the overhead lights. Most of the offices were dark. He pressed the button and waited, his mind already moving through tomorrow's schedule. Another board meeting, another presentation about quarterly earnings, another day of putting on the mask of the confident, successful businessman who had it all figured out. The elevator dinged and he stepped inside. As the doors closed, he caught his reflection in the polished metal. Gray hair at his temples that hadn't been there 5 years ago, lines around his eyes that seemed to have appeared overnight. He looked away. The elevator descended smoothly, floor numbers lighting up one by one. 41, 40, 39. Daniel shifted his briefcase to his other hand. It felt heavier than usual tonight. When the doors opened on the ground floor, he stepped out into the vast marble lobby. The space always felt too big at night, too empty. During the day, it buzzed with hundreds of employees, visitors, and delivery people. Now it was just a canyon of polished stone and glass, his footsteps echoing as he walked toward the exit. He was moving fast, the way he always did. Years of rushing from one meeting to another had trained him to walk like he was constantly late, for something important. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, glancing at the screen. An email from his VP of operations. Something about the Tokyo office that apparently couldn't wait until morning. Daniel stopped walking to read the message, his briefcase hanging at his side. He typed a quick response with one hand, his thumb moving rapidly across the screen. He hit send and was about to pocket the phone when another message came through. Then another. He sighed and kept walking while reading, trying to deal with both at once. That was when it happened. His briefcase, with its worn leather and loose brass clasps, chose that exact moment to give up. The bottom clasp popped open, then the top one. Before Daniel could react, the briefcase swung open and everything inside went tumbling out. Papers scattered across the polished marble floor like oversized confetti. File folders landed with soft slaps. His phone charger skittered away toward a potted plant. Pens rolled in different directions. A bottle of aspirin bounced twice and came to rest near a trash can. "Oh, for crying out loud," Daniel muttered. He looked around the empty lobby, half hoping someone would appear to help, half grateful no one was there to witness this moment of chaos. He set down what remained of his briefcase and got down on one knee, starting to gather the mess. A 3-page report here, a folder of budget projections there. The papers had spread out in a remarkably wide radius, as if they had been planning their escape for months. That was when he heard footsteps approaching. Quick, light footsteps that suggested someone younger than him. "Sir, let me help you with that." Daniel looked up. A young woman was hurrying toward him from the far side of the lobby. She was wearing simple work clothes, jeans, and a gray t-shirt, with her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked to be in her early 20s with warm brown eyes that held genuine concern. "Oh, no, that's okay," Daniel started to say, but she was already kneeling down beside him, gathering papers with quick, efficient movements. "It's no problem at all," she said with a slight smile. "Looks like your briefcase had other plans for the evening." Despite himself, Daniel felt a small smile tug at his own lips. Yeah, I guess it decided today was the day to retire. They worked in silence for a moment, collecting the scattered items. Daniel noticed she was careful with the papers, making sure not to crumple them as she stacked them neatly. There was a bucket and mop standing about 20 feet away. She must be part of the cleaning crew. I've got most of it over here, she said, standing up with an armful of folders. I think there are a few more things over by that column. Thank you, Daniel said, meaning it. I really appreciate this. He walked over to retrieve the items she had mentioned. A folder, his phone charger, and then he saw something else, something small and silver catching the light from the overhead fixtures. His heart stopped. No, it couldn't be. But even from several feet away, he recognized it. The delicate silver chain. The oval shape of the locket. The intricate pattern engraved on the front, a design of intertwining vines and tiny flowers. The young woman reached it before he did. She bent down and picked it up, holding it carefully in her palm. The locket caught the light gleaming against her skin. You dropped this, sir, she said, walking toward him with her hand extended. Daniel couldn't move. He stood frozen in place, staring at the locket in her hand. His mouth went dry. His vision seemed to narrow until all he could see was that small piece of silver. That impossible object that shouldn't be here, couldn't be here. Sir? The young woman's voice seemed to come from very far away. Are you okay? He forced himself to breathe, to blink, to function like a normal human being instead of someone who had just seen a ghost. His voice came out rough. He cleared his throat and tried again. Yes, sorry, thank you. He reached out and took the locket from her palm, careful not to touch her hand. The metal was cool against his fingers, solid, real. He closed his fist around it, feeling the edges press into his palm. It was identical, absolutely identical to the locket he had given Victoria on their 5th anniversary. The same jeweler, the same design, the same weight in his hand. He had spent hours in that little shop in the old part of town, working with the craftsmen to create something unique, something that would be just for her. Victoria had worn it every single day for 8 years. Every day until the accident. Sir, are you sure you're all right? The young woman was looking at him with genuine worry now. You look really pale. Do you need to sit down? Daniel shook his head, trying to pull himself together. No, I'm fine. Just a long day. Thank you for your help. He shoved the locket into his pocket and grabbed the papers she had gathered, taking them perhaps a bit too quickly. He needed to get out of here. Needed to get somewhere private where he could think, where he could breathe, where he could figure out what had just happened. Are you sure? She persisted. I can get you some water or… I'm fine, Daniel said, his voice coming out sharper than he intended. He saw her take a small step back and guilt washed over him. She was just trying to help. None of this was her fault. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to snap. Thank you for helping me. Really. He stuffed everything back into his briefcase and held it closed with both hands since the clasps were clearly done for. Then he turned and walked quickly toward the exit, his heart pounding in his chest. Behind him, he heard her voice, soft and uncertain. Have a good night, sir. He pushed through the glass doors without responding, stepping out into the rain. The cold water hit his face, but he barely felt it. He walked to his car on autopilot, got in and sat in the driver's seat with the engine off, staring straight ahead. After a long moment, he pulled the locket from his pocket and held it under the dome light. His hands were shaking slightly as he examined it. The vine pattern was exactly right. The small clasp on the side opened the same way. Even the weight felt identical. With careful fingers, he opened the locket. Inside was a small photograph, slightly faded. A woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. She looked to be in her 40s with the same dark hair as the young woman who had helped him, pulled back in a similar style. Daniel's mind was racing. This wasn't Victoria's locket. It couldn't be. Victoria's locket had been buried with her 3 years ago. He had held it one last time before they closed the casket, had pressed it to his lips and whispered goodbye. This was someone else's locket. A different woman, a different life, but it was identical, and that was impossible. The jeweler who had made Victoria's locket had told him it was a custom piece, that the design was unique. Daniel had paid extra for that exclusivity, had wanted Victoria to have something that was only hers. So how did that young woman's mother, because surely that's who the photograph showed, how did she end up with the exact same locket? Daniel sat in his car in the parking garage for 20 minutes, turning the locket over and over in his hands. trying to make sense of something that made no sense at all. The rain drummed on the roof of his car. Somewhere in the distance, a car alarm went off and then fell silent. Finally, he put the Locket carefully on the passenger seat, started the engine, and drove home. But his mind stayed in that lobby, replaying the moment over and over, the young woman's hand extended toward him, the silver gleaming in the light, the way his heart had simply stopped. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He sat in his study with the Locket on the desk in front of him, next to a photograph of Victoria wearing her identical locket, the one that was supposed to be unique, the one that was supposed to be buried 3 floors underground in the cemetery across town. Something was happening here, something he didn't understand, but he was going to find out what it was, because in that split second when the young woman had held out the Locket, he had seen something in her eyes, something familiar, a warmth, a kindness, the same quality that had first made him fall in love with Victoria all those years ago, and he couldn't shake the feeling that this was no accident. That somehow, impossibly, Victoria was reaching out to him from wherever she was now, or maybe he was just losing his mind. That was possible too. Daniel picked up the Locket again and held it up to the light, studying every detail. Tomorrow, he decided, he would go back to that building. He would find that young woman, and he would get some answers. Because if there was one thing his years in business had taught him, it was that nothing happened by coincidence. Everything had a reason. Everything connected, he just had to find out how. Daniel spent the entire next day distracted. During the morning executive meeting, he found himself staring out the window instead of following the presentation. His CFO had to repeat a question twice before he realized someone was talking to him. By lunch, his assistant had asked him 3 times if he was feeling all right. He wasn't all right. He was obsessed. The Locket sat in his desk drawer, wrapped carefully in a handkerchief. Every hour or so, he would pull it out and examine it again, as if the answers would somehow appear if he just looked hard enough. They never did. At 6:30, when most of his staff had already left for the day, Daniel closed his laptop and stood up. He had made a decision. He was going back to the building tonight. He was going to find that young woman and ask her about the Locket. Simple as that. The rational part of his brain told him this was ridiculous. What was he going to say? "Excuse me, but your mother's jewelry is mysteriously identical to my dead wife's, and I need to know why." It sounded insane even in his own head, but the other part of him, the part that had barely slept in 3 years, the part that still reached across the bed sometimes in the middle of the night expecting to find someone there, that part needed answers. Needed some kind of explanation for why the universe had thrown this impossible coincidence in his face. Daniel grabbed his coat and a new briefcase he had pulled from his closet that morning. This one had clasps that actually worked. He took the elevator down and walked through the lobby, barely noticing the people he passed. The drive back to the office building took 20 minutes in evening traffic. He parked in the visitor section this time and sat in his car for a moment, trying to figure out exactly what he was going to say. Nothing good came to mind, so he decided he would just have to improvise. The lobby was quiet when he entered. A different security guard sat at the front desk, an older man who nodded at Daniel but didn't ask any questions. Daniel walked past him, trying to look like he had forgotten something in his office and needed to retrieve it. But he didn't head for the elevators. Instead, he wandered around the ground floor looking for any sign of the cleaning crew. The building was huge, with multiple wings and corridors branching off in different directions. He checked the east wing first, nothing, then the west wing. Still nothing. He was starting to feel foolish when he heard voices coming from one of the side hallways. One was definitely female, young. The other was male, older, speaking with a slight accent. Daniel followed the sound and found himself in a corridor lined with conference rooms. At the far end, he saw them. The young woman from last night was there, wearing similar work clothes. She was emptying trash bins while talking to an older man who was replacing the water cooler bottles in one of the rooms. The man looked to be in his 60s, with gray hair and the strong build of someone who had done physical work his whole life. He wore the same uniform as the young woman, a gray shirt with the cleaning company's logo on the pocket. Daniel's heart started beating faster. He took a breath and walked toward them, his shoes clicking on the tile floor. The young woman looked up first. Recognition flashed across her face, followed by surprise. "Oh, hello," she said. "The briefcase gentleman from yesterday." Did you need something? Daniel realized he hadn't actually prepared what to say. Yes, actually, I wanted to thank you properly for helping me last night. I was pretty stressed and I don't think I was very polite. She smiled. A genuine warm smile that reminded him so much of the woman in the Locket photograph that it almost hurt. Oh, you were fine. Don't worry about it. We all have those days. The older man had stopped what he was doing and was watching the exchange with curious eyes. He said something to the young woman in Spanish. She responded in the same language, and Daniel caught enough words to understand she was explaining who he was. This is my father, Roberto, she said to Daniel. Dad, this is... I'm sorry, I don't actually know your name. Daniel, he said, extending his hand to Roberto. Daniel Harrison. Roberto's handshake was firm, his palm calloused. Nice to meet you, Mr. Harrison. His English was good but heavily accented. My daughter told me about last night. Your briefcase had a rough evening. It did, Daniel agreed with a small laugh. 30 years of service and it picked yesterday to fall apart. That's how it goes sometimes, Roberto said, nodding. Things hold together until they don't. There was a moment of silence. Daniel knew he should say something, ask the question he had come here to ask, but suddenly it felt impossible. How did you bring up something like this without sounding crazy? I'm Isabel, by the way, the young woman said. I realized I never introduced myself yesterday either. Isabel, Daniel repeated. The name fit her somehow. It's nice to officially meet you. Another silence. Isabel and her father exchanged a glance. They probably thought he was strange, coming back here just to say thank you. Maybe he was strange. So, Isabel said carefully, did you find everything that fell out of your briefcase? Nothing missing? This was his opening. Daniel seized it. Actually, that's sort of why I came back. The locket you picked up, I was wondering, where did it come from? Isabel's hand went automatically to her neck and Daniel saw that she was wearing it. The silver chain caught the fluorescent lights of the hallway. It was my mother's, why do you ask? Daniel felt his mouth go dry. Seeing it on her around her neck made it even more real somehow. It looks very similar to one that I used to know. The design is distinctive. I was curious where your mother might have gotten it. Isabel's fingers touched the locket gently, the way people touch things that mean everything to them. I don't know exactly. She had it for the last few years of her life. I think someone gave it to her as a gift, but she never said who. The last few years? Daniel asked. His mind was starting to put pieces together, though he wasn't sure yet what picture they were forming. My mom passed away 3 years ago, Isabel said quietly. Roberto moved slightly closer to his daughter, a protective gesture. She was sick for a long time before that, but the last 3 years after she got better, they were good years. She wore this every day 3 years ago, the same year Victoria died. I'm sorry for your loss, Daniel said, and he meant it. He knew that particular pain too well. Thank you, Isabel said. I'm sorry, but why are you so interested in the locket? Did your wife have one like it? Daniel hesitated. How much should he tell them? They were strangers, but something about Isabel's open, honest face made him want to be honest in return. Yes, he said finally. My wife had one exactly like it. Exactly. I had it custom made for her at a small jewelry shop about 10 years ago. The jeweler told me it was a unique design, so when I saw yours I was surprised. Isabel pulled the locket out from under her shirt collar, holding it so they could all see it better. This one? Yes, Daniel said. May I? She hesitated for just a second, then unclasped it and handed it to him. The weight of it in his palm was achingly familiar. He opened it carefully, looking again at the photograph inside. The woman smiled up at him, frozen in a moment of happiness that was now gone forever. Your mother? He asked. Yes. That was taken about 4 years ago, not long after she got the locket. Daniel examined the back of the locket, looking for any marking or signature. There, in tiny engraved letters, he saw it. R.M., the same initials that were on Victoria's locket. Raymond Morrison, the jeweler who had made it. His hand started to shake slightly. This was impossible. Raymond had told him the design was one of a kind, had told him that he was creating something unique. Had Daniel paid extra for a lie? Mr. Harrison? Isabel's voice was concerned. Are you okay? You look upset. I'm fine, Daniel said automatically, then stopped himself. Actually, no. I'm confused. very confused. This locket is identical to my wife's, and I was told hers was custom made. One of a kind. But obviously that wasn't true. Roberto spoke up, his voice gentle. Maybe the jeweler made another one later? Sometimes people change their minds about things. Maybe, Daniel said, but he didn't believe it. Something else was going on here. Something he didn't understand yet. He handed the locket back to Isabel. She put it on again, tucking it back under her shirt. When did your wife pass away? She asked softly. 3 years ago, Daniel said. April 15th, Isabel's eyes widened. That's the same month my mom started getting better. Early April. She had been waiting for a heart transplant for almost 2 years, and then suddenly they called and said they had one. The world seemed to tilt sideways. A heart transplant. In April. 3 years ago. Victoria had died on April 15th. She had been an organ donor. Daniel had signed the papers at the hospital. His hands numb, his mind not really processing what he was doing. The doctors had explained that her heart, her lungs, her kidneys, all of them could help save other people's lives. He had nodded and signed because that's what Victoria would have wanted. She had always been generous, always thinking of others, but he had never followed up, had never asked who received her organs. He hadn't wanted to know. It had felt too raw, too personal. Victoria's heart beating in someone else's chest? He couldn't handle thinking about it. Now standing in this hallway with Isabel and Roberto, Daniel felt like someone had just pulled the ground out from under him. Mr. Harrison? Roberto's hand was on his shoulder, steadying him. You should sit down. You look like you might fall over. Daniel let them guide him to a bench against the wall. He sat down heavily, his mind racing. I think, he said slowly, I think my wife's heart might have been donated to your mother. The words hung in the air between them. Isabel stared at him, her mouth slightly open. Roberto made a small sound, something between a gasp and a prayer. That's not possible, Isabel whispered. Is it? I don't know, Daniel said. But the timing matches. The locket. It all matches. Isabel sat down next to him on the bench. Her father remained standing, looking between them with an expression of stunned disbelief. After the transplant, Isabel said slowly, my mom changed. Everyone noticed it. She had always been quiet, careful, but after she got better, she became more adventurous. She wanted to try new things. She started listening to classical music all the time, which she had never cared about before. She took up painting. She laughed more easily. Daniel felt tears stinging his eyes. Victoria played piano, classical. She painted watercolors in her spare time. Oh my God, Isabel breathed. They sat in silence for a long moment. Roberto had moved to lean against the wall, his hand over his mouth, his eyes distant. How did your mother get the locket? Daniel finally asked. Isabel shook her head. I don't know. One day she just had it. I asked her about it once and she got this strange look on her face. She said it had been given to her by someone who wanted her to have it, but she wouldn't say who. I thought maybe it was from the hospital or one of her doctors, but she wouldn't explain. Daniel's mind went to the transplant coordinators, the people who handled organ donations. They weren't supposed to give out identifying information about donors or recipients. It was all supposed to be anonymous unless both parties agreed to meet. But maybe someone had bent the rules. Maybe someone had thought that giving Isabel's mother Victoria's locket would be a kind gesture. Or maybe Victoria had arranged it somehow before she died. She had carried a donor card in her wallet for years. She had always been clear about her wishes. Had she left instructions? Asked someone to do this? He would never know. I need to find out for sure, Daniel said, standing up. I need to check the records, talk to the transplant center. Would you be willing to help me confirm this? If it's true? Isabel stood up too. She looked at her father, who nodded slowly. Yes, she said. I want to know too. I mean, if your wife saved my mother's life. If she gave us 3 more years with her, her voice broke. Daniel understood. Those 3 years had been precious. Borrowed time. A gift, Victoria's gift, thank you, he said quietly, for helping me pick up my briefcase, for talking to me tonight, for everything. Isabel smiled through tears that were just starting to form. I think maybe I was supposed to help you. Maybe it wasn't an accident. Roberto stepped forward and put his arm around his daughter. Nothing is an accident, he said firmly. My wife always said that. God has a plan. We don't always see it, but it's there. Daniel had stopped believing in plans or God or anything beyond random chance when Victoria died. But standing here now, looking at Isabel wearing his wife's locket, thinking about Victoria's heart beating in her mother's chest for 3 more years, he felt something shift inside him. Maybe Roberto was right. Maybe there was more to this than coincidence. "Can I get your phone number?" Daniel asked. "So I can let you know what I find out?" Isabel pulled out her phone and they exchanged numbers. As Daniel was saving her contact information, he noticed the background on her phone screen. It was a photo of her mother, the same woman from the locket, laughing at the camera with her arms around Isabel. She looked happy, healthy, alive. "That was from her last birthday," Isabel said, noticing where he was looking. "We had a party at the park. She was so full of energy that day. She played with my little cousins for hours. We had no idea we only had 6 more months with her." "What happened?" Daniel asked gently. "If you don't mind me asking." "Accident at work," Roberto said, his voice rough with old pain. "She was a caretaker at a nursing home. One of the residents fell and she tried to catch him. They both went down the stairs. He survived. She didn't. She died saving someone else," Isabel added. "Just like your wife saved her. It's like the circle completed itself." Daniel felt something loosen in his chest, some knot of grief that had been tight for 3 years. He didn't know if he believed in circles or divine plans or any of it. But he believed in this connection. This strange, impossible connection between his loss and their loss, between Victoria's death and her continued legacy. "I'll call you tomorrow," he promised, "after I make some calls and check the records." "We'll be waiting," Isabel said. Daniel walked back through the building in a daze. The security guard called out a good night and he barely heard it. He got in his car and sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. Then he pulled out his phone and started making a list. The transplant center, the organ donation network, Victoria's doctors. He would call them all tomorrow. He would get confirmation, because he needed to know for certain. Needed to know that Victoria's last act of generosity had given Isabel 3 more years with her mother. Needed to know that the locket had found its way to the right person. Needed to know that maybe, just maybe, love didn't end when life did. Daniel barely slept that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his mind running through everything Isabel had told him. The timeline matched perfectly. The personality changes, the classical music, the painting. It all pointed to one impossible, beautiful truth. But he needed proof. He needed to be absolutely certain before he let himself believe it. At 7 in the morning, he was already showered and dressed, sitting at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee and his laptop. He had made a list the night before of everyone he needed to contact. Now it was time to start making calls. The first number he dialed was the hospital where Victoria had been taken after the accident. He asked to be transferred to the organ donation coordinator's office. After being put on hold twice and transferred 3 times, he finally got through to someone who could help. "This is Jennifer Martinez," a woman's voice said. "How can I help you?" Daniel took a breath. "My name is Daniel Harrison. My wife, Victoria Harrison, was an organ donor 3 years ago. She passed away on April 15th. I'm trying to get information about who received her organs." There was a pause. "Mr. Harrison, I'm sure you understand that information is confidential. We have very strict privacy laws that protect both donors and recipients." "I know," Daniel said quickly, "but I think I may have accidentally met one of the recipients. Or rather, their family. I just need confirmation, please, it's important." Another pause, longer this time. "Can you tell me more about the situation?" Daniel explained everything. The locket. Meeting Isabel. The timing. The personality changes her mother had experienced after the transplant. As he talked, he could hear Jennifer typing on her end of the line. "Hold on," she said finally. "Let me look something up." Daniel waited, his heart pounding. He could hear more typing. The click of a mouse, the sound of papers rustling. "Mr. Harrison," Jennifer said slowly, "I can't give you specific details without proper authorization, but I can tell you that your wife's wishes were very clear. She left detailed instructions about her organ donation, and yes, her heart did save someone's life that April." "Can you tell me anything else?" Daniel asked. "Anything at all?" "Not without going through the proper channels," Jennifer said. "But if you and the recipient's family both agree to share information, we can facilitate that. We have a process for donor families and recipient families who want to meet or exchange information. Would you like me to start that process?" Yes, Daniel said immediately. Please. I'll need some information from you, and I'll need to contact the recipient's family to see if they're willing to participate. This can take some time, maybe a few weeks, and what if they've already agreed? Daniel asked. What if the recipient's daughter is willing to share information? Then it would go much faster, Jennifer said. Do you have their contact information? Daniel gave her Isabel's phone number. Jennifer promised to reach out to her that day and start the paperwork. It wasn't the immediate confirmation Daniel wanted, but it was something. His next call was to the jewelry shop where he had bought Victoria's locket. He had to look up the address online because it had been so many years. The shop was still there, still run by the same jeweler, Raymond Morrison. The man had to be in his 70s by now. The phone rang 4 times before someone picked up. Morrison's Fine Jewelry. Hello, is Raymond available? This is Raymond. What can I do for you? Daniel explained who he was, reminded Raymond of the custom locket he had made 10 years ago. You told me it was a unique design, one of a kind, but I've seen another one exactly like it. I need to know if you made a second one. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Mr. Harrison, Raymond said finally, I remember you. I remember your wife. Beautiful woman. Always so kind when she came into the shop. I was heartbroken when I heard she passed. Thank you, Daniel said. But about the locket, I didn't make a second one, Raymond interrupted. Not exactly. What do you mean, not exactly? Raymond sighed. About 3 years ago, a woman came into my shop. She was recovering from major surgery, she said. Heart transplant. She told me that someone had given her a gift, a beautiful locket, but she wanted to pass it on to someone else who had helped her. She asked if I could make an exact replica so she could keep the original safe and give the copy to her daughter. Daniel's breath caught. She wanted you to copy the locket? Yes, she showed it to me and I recognized it immediately. It was the one I had made for your wife. I asked her where she got it, but she wouldn't say. Just said it had been a gift from someone special. She seemed very emotional about the whole thing. And you made her a copy? I did, Raymond said. Exactly the same down to the last detail. She picked it up 2 weeks later, paid in cash. I remember she cried when I gave it to her. Said it was perfect. Daniel's mind was racing. So Isabel's mother had received Victoria's original locket somehow, then had a copy made. But why? Why not just keep the original? Did she say why she wanted a copy instead of just giving her daughter the original? Daniel asked. She said the original was too precious to risk losing or damaging. She wanted to keep it safe. I got the impression it meant more to her than just a piece of jewelry. It was like it represented something important. A second chance, maybe a second chance. Victoria's heart giving her a second chance at life. Thank you, Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you for telling me this. Mr. Harrison, Raymond said gently, I don't know the whole story here, but I can guess some of it. Your wife's locket ended up with someone who needed it, someone who treasured it. That's a beautiful thing. After he hung up, Daniel sat at his kitchen table for a long time just thinking. Victoria's original locket was out there somewhere. Maybe Isabel's mother had been buried with it. Maybe it was in a safety deposit box. Maybe Isabel had it and didn't even know it was the original. His phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Isabel. The hospital just called me. The coordinator, Jennifer. She explained everything. I told her yes. I want to confirm everything too. Can we meet? Daniel texted back immediately. Yes, when and where? There's a coffee shop 2 blocks from the building. Rosie's, do you know it? I'll find it. What time? I get off work at 3. Is that okay? Perfect. I'll see you then. The hours until 3 o'clock crawled by. Daniel tried to work, but he couldn't focus. He answered emails without really reading them. He attended a video conference call and barely heard a word anyone said. Finally, at 2:30, he gave up and drove to the coffee shop. Rosie's was a small place with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. The kind of place that had been there for decades and would probably be there for decades more. Daniel ordered a coffee he didn't really want and sat at a table by the window to wait. Isabel arrived right at 3, still in her work clothes. She spotted Daniel and waved, then went to the counter to order something. A few minutes later, she joined him at the table holding a large cup of tea. Thank you for meeting me, Daniel said. Of course, Isabel replied. She looked nervous, her fingers tapping against her cup. This is all so strange. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and find out it was a dream. I know the feeling, Daniel said. He told her about his conversations that morning, about Jennifer at the hospital and Raymond at the jewelry shop. Isabel listened intently, her eyes growing wider with each detail. So my mom had the original locket copied, she said when he finished. I wonder where the original is now. I was wondering the same thing. My dad might know, Isabel said. He helped Mom sort through a lot of her things after she died. There's still some boxes in our garage that we haven't gone through. It might be there. Would you mind looking? Daniel asked. I know it's a lot to ask. No, Isabel interrupted. I want to find it. If your wife's locket is in my garage, you should have it back. They sat in silence for a moment, sipping their drinks. The coffee shop was busy with the afternoon rush, people coming in for their caffeine fix, students with laptops, couples on dates. Normal life happening all around them while they sat there discussing the impossible. Can I ask you something? Isabel said finally. What was your wife like? Daniel smiled, a real smile for the first time in what felt like forever. She was extraordinary. Smart, funny kind. She could light up a room just by walking into it. She played piano professionally, gave concerts all over the country, but her real passion was teaching. She gave free lessons to kids whose families couldn't afford them. She said music should be for everyone, not just people with money. She sounds wonderful, Isabel said softly. She was, Daniel agreed.
She was also stubborn as hell.
Once she made up her mind about something, there was no changing it. She decided she was going to marry me on our second date. Told me so. I thought she was crazy. Isabel laughed. But she was right? She was right, Daniel confirmed. She usually was. It was annoying. My mom was stubborn too, Isabel said, especially after the transplant. Before that, she was quiet. She let life happen to her. But after she got better, it was like she woke up. She started saying yes to things. She went back to school and got her nursing certification. She traveled to Mexico to see family she hadn't seen in years. She told me once that getting a second chance at life made her realize how much time she had wasted being afraid. That sounds like something Victoria would have said. Daniel murmured, do you think... Isabel hesitated. Do you think when someone gets an organ transplant, they get some of the donor's personality too? I know it sounds crazy, but there were so many changes in my mom, things that didn't make sense. Daniel had read about this phenomenon. Cellular memory, some people called it. The idea that organs carried not just biological information, but somehow retained aspects of the donor's personality, their likes and dislikes, their traits. The scientific community was divided on whether it was real or just coincidence and imagination. I don't know, he said honestly, but I know your mother started loving the same things Victoria loved. That can't be completely random. The music was the weirdest part, Isabel said. My mom used to listen to Spanish radio, ranchera music, that kind of thing. After the transplant, she suddenly wanted to listen to Chopin and Beethoven. She would put it on in the morning and just sit there with her coffee, eyes closed like she was somewhere else. Chopin was Victoria's favorite, Daniel said quietly. She used to play his nocturnes when she was stressed. Said they calmed her mind. Isabel's eyes filled with tears. My mom did the same thing. When she was worried about something, she would put on Chopin. I never understood why until now. They talked for 2 hours, sharing stories about the women they had lost. Daniel told Isabel about Victoria's terrible sense of direction, how she got lost driving to places she had been 100 times. Isabel told him about her mother's cooking, how she could make a feast out of nothing, how the kitchen was always full of warmth and good smells. With each story, the connection between them grew stronger. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even exactly friendship yet. It was something else, something deeper. They were bound together by loss and love in the mysterious way life sometimes circles back on itself. Finally, Isabel looked at her phone and gasped. Oh my God, it's after 5. I was supposed to meet my dad an hour ago. He's going to worry. I'm sorry, Daniel said.
I didn't mean to keep you so long.
Don't apologize, Isabel said, standing up. This was important. I'll text my dad right now. She pulled out her phone and typed quickly. He says he's fine. He's asking if you want to come over for dinner. Daniel blinked in surprise. Tonight? If you want to. No pressure. But my dad is a really good cook, and I think he wants to hear about all of this too. Plus, we could look for that locket in the garage. Daniel didn't have to think about it. I'd love to. They drove separately to Isabel's house, which turned out to be a small, neat home in a working-class neighborhood about 20 minutes from downtown. The lawn was carefully maintained, and there were flowers in the window boxes. A Virgin Mary statue stood in the front garden, surrounded by solar lights. Roberto met them at the door, wiping his hands on a dish towel. The smell of something delicious drifted out from inside. "Mr. Harrison, welcome. Please come in." The inside of the house was cozy and lived in. Family photos covered nearly every surface. Daniel spotted Isabel at various ages, from a gap-toothed kid to her high school graduation. And in many of the photos was the woman from the Locket, Isabel's mother, always smiling. "That's my mom," Isabel said, noticing where he was looking. She pointed to a large framed photo on the wall. That was taken about 6 months before she died. The woman in the photo looked vibrant and healthy, her arm around Isabel, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. She wore the locket, Daniel noticed. You could just see the silver chain around her neck. "She was beautiful," Daniel said. "She was," Roberto agreed, his voice rough with emotion. He cleared his throat. "Dinner will be ready in about 30 minutes. Isabel, why don't you take Mr. Harrison to the garage? You can look for that box while I finish cooking." The garage was detached from the house, sitting at the end of a short driveway. Inside it was surprisingly organized. Tools hung neatly on pegboards. Shelves lined one wall, holding boxes that were clearly labeled. Holiday decorations, tax records, kitchen stuff. "My dad is very organized," Isabel explained. "After Mom died, he couldn't stand mess. I think it made him feel like he had control over something." She scanned the shelves, then pointed. "There. That one says Rita's things. That's my mom." They pulled down the box together. It wasn't large, but it was heavy. Isabel set it on the workbench and opened it carefully, like she was handling something fragile and precious. Inside were the small treasures of a life. A rosary with mother-of-pearl beads, a recipe book with handwritten notes in the margins, a scarf that still smelled faintly of perfume, cards from patients at the nursing home where she had worked, and at the very bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, a small velvet jewelry box. Isabel picked it up with trembling hands. She opened it slowly. Inside, nestled on white satin, was the locket. Victoria's locket. The original. Daniel felt his heart stop for the second time in 2 days. "This is it," Isabel whispered. "This must be the original one. The one your wife wore." She held it out to him, but Daniel shook his head. "You should open it first." Isabel carefully removed the locket from the box and opened the clasp. Inside was a photograph, but it wasn't the same one that was in Isabel's locket. This photo showed 2 people, a man and a woman, young and in love, smiling at the camera on what looked like their wedding day. "That's you," Isabel said, looking at Daniel, "and that's your wife." Daniel took the locket with shaking hands. It was Victoria's wedding photo, the same one he kept on his bedside table. He had forgotten it was in the locket. Forgotten because he had been too broken to look at it before they buried her. But Victoria hadn't been buried with this locket. Somehow it had made its way to Rita, who had treasured it, kept it safe, and left it for her daughter to find. "Your wife was beautiful," Isabel said softly. Daniel couldn't speak. He just nodded, staring at Victoria's face, frozen forever in a moment of pure happiness. A moment when they had both believed they had forever ahead of them. "Mr. Harrison," Isabel said gently, "I think my mom would want you to have this back." But Daniel shook his head. "No," he managed to say. "This belongs to you now. Your mother wore it. It gave her comfort. It connects all of us. You should keep it. Are you sure?" Daniel closed the locket carefully and placed it back in Isabel's hands. "I'm sure. But maybe sometimes I could see it, if that's okay." Isabel threw her arms around him in an impulsive hug. Daniel stiffened for just a moment, surprised, then hugged her back. She felt so small, so young, so full of life. When she pulled away, they were both crying. "Come on," Isabel said, wiping her eyes. "Let's go eat. My dad's cooking is too good to let it get cold." They walked back to the house together, carrying the locket and a new understanding between them. Sometimes the end of one story was the beginning of another. Sometimes loss created connections that would never have existed otherwise. And sometimes, Daniel thought love found a way to continue, even after the heart stopped beating. The official confirmation came 2 weeks later, in the form of a letter from the Organ Donation Network. Daniel sat in his home office, holding the envelope in his hands for a full minute before he finally opened it. His hands were steady, but his heart was racing. The letter was formal, filled with medical terminology and legal language, but the meaning was clear. Victoria's heart had indeed been transplanted to Rita Rodriguez on April 16th, 3 years ago. One day after Victoria died, the letter included basic information about the transplant, the success of the procedure, and a note that Rita had lived for nearly 3 more years before her accidental death. Daniel read the letter 3 times, even though he had already known the truth in his heart. Sometimes you needed official confirmation, something on paper that said, yes, this impossible thing really happened. He called Isabel immediately. She answered on the second ring, sounding breathless. "Did you get the letter?" "Just now," Daniel said. "Did you get one too?" "Yes, I'm reading it right now. It's real. It's all real." They stayed on the phone for a few minutes, not saying much, just processing what they already knew. When they finally hung up, Daniel sat back in his chair and stared out the window. 3 years. Rita had lived for 3 years with Victoria's heart. 3 years of extra memories with her daughter. 3 years of laughter and love and life that wouldn't have happened without Victoria's final gift. It should have made him feel better, knowing that his wife's death had meaning, that something good had come from something so terrible. And it did, in a way, but it also opened up old wounds, made him think about all the years he and Victoria should have had together, all the memories they would never make. His sister Rachel called that evening. She lived across the country, but they talked at least once a week. "You sound different," she said after they had exchanged the usual pleasantries. "What's going on?" Daniel told her everything. About the locket, about Isabel and Roberto, about the confirmation. Rachel listened without interrupting, which was unusual for her. She was typically full of opinions and advice, always ready to jump in with her thoughts. When he finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Danny," she finally said, using the childhood nickname only she still used. "This is incredible. It's like Victoria's still reaching out, still making connections even after she's gone." "I know," Daniel said, "but I don't know what to do with it. I mean, what happens now? Do we just go back to our separate lives? Do we stay in touch? What's the right thing here?" "What do you want to do?" Rachel asked. That was the question, wasn't it? Daniel had been so focused on finding out the truth that he hadn't thought about what came after. "I don't know," he admitted. "These people, Isabel and Roberto, they feel like family somehow. But they're strangers. I've known them for 2 weeks. Sometimes 2 weeks is enough," Rachel said gently. "Sometimes you just know when people are meant to be in your life." "What does your gut tell you?" Daniel thought about Isabel's smile, so much like Rita's in the photographs. He thought about Roberto's firm handshake and the way he had welcomed a stranger into his home. He thought about the dinner they had shared, the stories they had traded, the comfortable silences between the conversation. "My gut tells me I don't want to lose this connection," he said. "Then don't," Rachel said simply. "Life is too short, Danny. You of all people know that. If these people make you feel less alone, hold on to them." After they hung up, Daniel sat with his sister's words for a long time. She was right. He did feel less alone when he was with Isabel and Robert. For the first time in 3 years, he felt like part of something again. Not just a man going through the motions of living, but someone who was actually connected to other people. The next day, Daniel did something impulsive. He called Isabel during his lunch break. "Are you busy this weekend?" he asked. "Just work," she said. "Why?" "I was thinking maybe we could do something. All 3 of us. You, me, and your father. Maybe go somewhere, spend some time together. Get to know each other better." There was a pause. Daniel worried he had overstepped, pushed too hard too fast. But then Isabel spoke, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "I think my dad would really like that." "What did you have in mind?" They decided on a Saturday trip to the botanical gardens on the edge of the city. It was a place Victoria had loved, somewhere Daniel hadn't been able to bring himself to visit since she died. But somehow going there,